Before we start this show, just a word from our sponsor, 20 by 20 Apparel. Founded in 2015, 20 by 20 Apparel brings original tributes to pro wrestling's classic arenas, moments, and events. They look to spotlight the bloopers, bleeps, and body slams along with the biggest, smallest, strangest, and strongest that pro wrestling has had to offer. Along with their awesome line of pro wrestling apparel, they do offer many services. In the world of wrestling, there are hundreds of shirts, promotions, flyers, social media accounts, and ads. Don't get lost in the sea of parody shirts and display fonts. They can provide professional graphic design services at a reasonable price. 20 by 20 also hand screen prints all the tees in-house. If you would like to discuss possible run of tees, posters, koozies, foam fingers, or whatever, drop them a line. Go to 20 by 20 Apparel. That's the number 20x, the number 20 apparel.com. Now, let's get to the show.
Fresh is the word.
I'm Jim Duggan, got long wood for plenty hoes. I keep it fresher than fresh, but you already know. You suckers bummy, I'm money, I got a ton of flows. My weed loud like a motherfucking thunder roll. Your shit quiet like you ballin' on a budget though. We see your kicks and we laugh and yellin' what are those. You see me shining like a suit on puffy. You know my grindin' shit is too strong, buddy. That's why the dude call money. I be stuntin' like it's nothing at all. Cause it's nothing to me, it's probably something to y'all. Trying to smoke like me, then come and fuck with your dog. Got a closet full of kicks, you can't cop it tomorrow. And I'm fresher than the freshest, you can tell it's in my essence. Bitch, you see the way I'm rapping, yes I do this shit to death. I tell I'm running out of breath, I tell somebody cut a check. But either way you know it's fresh, and either way you know it's fresh. Fresh, we fresh. Fresh, fresh, goddammit, we fresh.
Welcome to the Fresh at the Word podcast. I'm your host, Kelly K. Fresh Frazier. And on Fresh at the Word, we like to deliver wisdom through great stories from the minds of bright creatives of pop culture. Through those stories, we like to dissect the journey of our guests and present actionable lessons and advice for our listeners, no matter what career or avenue of artistry they pursue. And this is episode 129. This episode's guest is comic book writer Lan Pitts. As a lifelong wrestling fan, Pitts got an opportunity to write for Boom Studios and their WWE comic book series. During our interview, we talked about being a wrestling fan and all the wrestling we have liked from the past and present. His stories are part of the Boom Studios WWE comic books, writing wrestling comic books for the casual comic fan, the freedom in writing wrestlers' stories in the comic book universe, the visual aspects of comic books, and how wrestling parallels the comic book world. Before we get into that interview, I definitely want to give a shout out to Knox Money, Bang Belushi, and Foulmouth for the theme music for Fresh is the Word. And I also want to remind you how you can support the podcast. You can always go to freshthepodcast.com and share any of the links to any of the episodes on any of your social media platforms. And you can also subscribe to Fresh is the Word pretty much anywhere where podcasts are streamed. And that includes Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Podbean, Spotify, pretty much anywhere. You can follow, subscribe at any of those places. Please rate and review if you can, especially on Apple Podcasts. That would help out a lot. If you want to send me anything, pitches, comments, concerns, whatever, you can always email me at djkfresh@gmail.com. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at kfreshisthe.word and on Facebook at facebook.com/kfresh. And you can follow Fresh is the Word on Twitter at Fresh is the Word, and that's is with the IZ. Instagram at Fresh is the Word Podcast, and Facebook at facebook.com/Fresh is the Podcast. All right, let's get into the interview with Lan Pitts. You're a suggestion from Leanna Kangas to someone that I should interview. Because it looks like we have a lot of things in common. You write for the WWE comic book. What's everything that you've been involved in recently?
That's pretty much it. I have a couple creator-owned works that I'm going to debut one at C2E2 and a few more that are going to be sprinkled throughout the year. I have a thing being looked at Image right now with Tom Feaster, and Yeah, that's pretty much it. I've been a contributor for Newsarama for about 11 years. I did comicbook.com for 2 years. So I'm all over the place.
Right, right. How did you get involved with being a part of the WWE comic?
So this is one of my favorite stories, and one that I like telling, sort of almost as a warning. When people ask, how did you break into comics? And it was me being pretty dumb, maybe somewhat ballsy. So the editor at the time, Jasmine Amiri, who's now an editor over at Lionforge, she was the editor of the WWE series. And then the series was announced, I think, in September of 2016, and it was going to launch, I think, that December or January. And so I approached her at New York Comic Con that year and basically was just like, you should let me pitch for you. And she goes, yeah, you should. And I was like, oh, well, I guess I have to go do this now. So then I did. And WWE liked it, Boom liked it, and I signed the contract that January. So, right. And when Jasmine left for Lionforge, Chris Rosa kept me on board, and it's been good ever since.
Yeah, I can tell you're a big wrestling fan. When did you first get into wrestling?
When I was 6.
Yeah.
So 1989. So that was basically just. I mean, I'm from the South, so Ric Flair and NWA, whereas Jim Crockett and Saturday Night Wrestling and all that kind of stuff, and then it became WCW in 1990, and I was a big Sting fan, and Flair left, but I still kept up with pretty much everything. So I mean, my first event was Starrcade '89 Future Shock at the Omni.
Okay.
And just kind of never stopped. Everyone talks about going in and out of phases with it, but no, it's kind of been a consistent.
Yeah, I kind of had my phases with it when I was a little kid. I was into the WWF. I would catch the NWA and WCW stuff that would be like on Saturday nights and stuff.
Yep.
And then I kind of got out of. I was kind of in and out of it for a few years, but then totally got back into it. How a lot of people got back into it in the 90s was when the NWO hit.
Yeah.
And then the Monday Night Wars. And I was heavy into it until the early 2000s when sort of WCW went away. And then WWE was the only thing in town, So, like, things kind of dropped off because there wasn't that competition anymore.
Well, yeah, it wasn't, mainstream competition, but that's when I kind of got involved with tape trading with my buddies. And, that's how I discovered guys like the American Dragon, Bryan Danielson, and CM Punk, and all those ROH guys. And WWA had its own thing, was World Wrestling All-Stars, which was an Australian promotion. And that's where a lot of guys from WCW went who didn't get signed, but that's where guys like AJ Styles got his start. That's where guys like Jeff Jarrett and Sting continued their careers. And then obviously when Jeff Jarrett left that to go form NWA TNA with his dad Jerry Jarrett, and they had weekly pay-per-views you could buy for $10.
Yeah.
So I did a few of those, but it was around the time they finally got a good deal on Spike, and they had their hour-long program, and I was really into them for a hot minute. Around like 2005 to 2007, I was really big into TNA because you had guys like Samoa Joe, you had guys like Petey Williams. Obviously when Kurt Angle revitalized his career there, Christian.
Yeah.
So, I mean...
Those were good years in TNA, especially for that X division.
Absolutely, yeah.
When you had AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels, and it was just hot in that X division.
Absolutely, yeah. So, it was good stuff. It was really good stuff.
Yeah, I was kind of in and out during, like, the 2000s. I kind of paid attention here and there about what was going on, but I wasn't, like, heavy into it. And then it wasn't until maybe another for today, until maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I got back into it heavy. I was kind of for the early part of this decade, I was in a really bad relationship with this girl So it took me away from a lot of things. So once I got out of that, then I got heavy into wrestling, and I think I'm like more into wrestling now than I've ever been. I'm into the
it's a good time. It's a good time to be a wrestling fan.
Yeah, I'm totally into a lot of the Japanese stuff. Definitely into the women's wrestling in Japan, the Joshi wrestling. Um, so it's a really good time right now to be a wrestling fan.
I believe so. I think wrestling really hit its renaissance around 2015. I really believe you had Ring of Honor coming up.
Yeah.
All those guys. Yeah, Jay Lethal really found himself. Dalton Castle became a mainstay after he left Shikara.
Yeah.
Adam Cole was really finding his stride again. And then New Japan, obviously, when Okada won the belt back in 2016 and just had like this 2-year streak of just being the man.
Right.
And so it really put all those guys into new places. Kenny Omega was finding his stride in the heavyweight division, winning the G1 Climax that year in 2016. And then, of course, obviously having the time limit draw match at Wrestle Kingdom.
Right.
With Okada the first time. So Wrestle Kingdom 11, I had to remember the number for a minute.
Right.
And I don't remember, like, what year was it? And then, of course, them doing New Japan World and having a service. So now is the time, if you can't, like, Independent Wrestling.tv has a whole thing out. Where
the streaming has been so good.
The streaming is so good.
Like, the New Japan World, that, like, just changed everything for a lot of those guys. It was just, like, guys like, the Bullet Club guys, like the Young Bucks and Gallows and Anderson. They went from, like, one day nobody knowing who they were to, like, everybody knowing who they were. Like, based off a lot of that streaming that New Japan did. Mm-hmm. And then they were able to just build off of that. So, like, the streaming services really sort of took this really good stuff that was happening already and made it, easier for people to really enjoy it.
Well, also the fact that they started airing older, I guess, essentially catching people up on Access TV.
Oh yeah, that too.
So people can find out, like, oh, I heard Shinsuke Nakamura got signed. Oh, well, this is his, random match with Carl Anderson in 2015. I can find out what this guy's all about before he comes on NXT. So yeah, I don't think it's ever been a better time, and also the fact it's been more accessible.
Yeah.
Wrestling like that's never been more accessible.
Yeah, and there's so many things that are changing now too, especially with the creation of AEW.
Yeah, I definitely think it's people have already like, oh, it looks like Nitro, and I'm like, well, good, that's fine. I don't care. That sounds great. Nitro was great. It had pyro in the intro. It was fun. So yeah, if anything's going to be a healthy alternative, and you can see kind of WWE treating this as a legitimate threat. And when you have videos of people having to change their shirts, that never used to be the case. Nobody really cares, but. Right. Now it's really gotten a lot of people sweating, especially with rumors of, like, okay, the Revival are going to leave, maybe Mike Kanellis, everyone else. It's always a major rumor, but now the fact that people can finally put to bed the rumor that Kenny Omega is coming to WWE with last night's press rally, and that's fine because he's a guy who doesn't really need it.
No.
He's a guy who doesn't need it, and that's fine, especially to the fact that I think that he is also an executive vice president. He is getting paid.
Oh yeah, he'll be fine.
Paid. So it's good for him. It's good for him, and it's good for business.
Yeah, it's good that there's people that are able to create their own lane now and be able to be successful. What Cody Rhodes has been able to do since he's left the WWE has been so great. It's been very inspiring.
I think so, especially when it was kind of hinted at last year when people were asking, oh, well, can't wait to see you at, like, Supercard or something. And he's like, not going to be there. And that was sort of the beginning of the rumblings back in October.
Right.
I think it was around October where people were like, after All In, my partner was even like, how much you want to bet they're going to start their own promotion? And I was like, that's a good bet. That's a real good bet. And you can see them, like, they didn't have a proper send-off in New Japan. Like, it was, it was unceremoniously, it was weird. And it's really still weird considering Kushida got this great send-off from New Japan, and Kenny just kind of got phased out. And it was very interesting to see a dynamic and how both were treated in that sort of way. Kenny was a main star and everything else, and Kushida was a contender in the junior division, but he got this great last match that he won with Tanahashi, and Kenny just kind of just silently went away. And it's so weird to consider that, but it's like, well, I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to claim like, oh, well, the sheet said this or anything like that, but it's very interesting to consider what exactly went backstage and how Kenny decided to leave the company in the way he did.
I feel like maybe he just did that, like that was his decision to be quiet about it. Everybody was kind of quiet about it. They're kind of doing it their own way. Like right now, Cody and the Young Bucks and Adam Page have been doing this little like indie run to also sort of announce people that they want to be a part of AEW, and it's super cool. And I love seeing the footage of it. So I think they just kind of like want to do things in their own way, and maybe they don't need that like ceremonious like last match or whatever.
I don't know. Something about, one thing I love about wrestling is the pageantry and the sort of code of honor they have amongst each other.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's not recommended, or it's not a prerequisite each time some great has to go over. But it's really weird because even like Shinsuke had a press conference where he had to relinquish the IC title, and Kenny, Kenny was their world champion. He's just like, I guess I'm out. And I don't know. It's just really weird. It could also be the fact that Harold Mage, the new president, I think CEO or CFO, I can't remember what his actual title is, of New Japan, was he just hell-bent on, when he made that whole speech to Dominion, talking about we're going to have this new expansion, United States is going to see some of the best wrestling. This is what we're going to do. And I guess almost like he felt like he had Kenny and Cody and the Bucks in his pocket for that sort of expansion. And then I guess Kenny decided to leave at some point, and that's when things could have soured.
Yeah.
This is all speculation,
right.
but that seems like a plausible sort of explanation. Because now their U.S. expansion is centered around Juice Robinson and David Finlay. So, sure.
Right.
Let's go there.
And that little U.S. tour that they had was really marred by our government shutdown because the Japanese guys couldn't get their work visas.
Well, especially because, so work visas, I think, especially something like this, take up for like 6 months to process.
Yeah.
So I figure, like, something was up. They may have filed for them earlier, or because the fact that it was almost gone for a month, it definitely halted things. Because now I'm curious, because I want to do the Supercard last year and had a really good time. That's when I did meet Kota, Kenny, Tanahashi, and it was just great. Just wow, holy man, it's spectacular. Just meeting like the best wrestlers in the world. And now it's like, who's actually going to be able to be there? Because with all these contracts going around, like Lucha Underground contracts, they're trying to get more guys from there. But it seems like those LU contracts are like ironclad, but they could get anybody they want from MLW.
Right.
So it's really like, it doesn't even seem like those contracts are worth the paper they're printed on. Because they just got Jimmy Havoc.
Right.
It took a second. I was like almost saying Jimmy Jacobs, but I'm like, that's not right. So yeah, they got Jimmy Havoc, and yeah, it's like, as we've said, it's a very interesting time to be a wrestling fan now because there's literally so much going on. There's so much in the air. But my main thing is like, oh my God, because I have a buddy of mine, Mario, was like, hey, we got these tickets, but then we got better tickets. We got you a pair if you want to go. They're 4th row, but like, if you're interested, let me know. And I'm like, yeah, I'd be interested. But I'm like, man, I don't, is at the same time, like, if the card isn't great, I'm not going to shell out, and I can just put that money towards like better Mania tickets because I still haven't got my Mania tickets yet.
Right.
Because I mean, well, last year how everything worked out, partner, we got paid basically like at the end of the year, and then we got really good Mania tickets. Like we were 40 feet away from the ramp.
Oh damn! Nice.
Oh yeah, we felt all the pyro. Saw all
you
the
saw
setups.
that big ass ramp that
we saw the big ass. Yeah, like we were 40 feet away from the ramp. Felt all the pyro from.
How does that ramp look in person?
Oh, great! It's amazing. Everything like it was one of those things where because I could only do 1 day of access because I treated myself to my one thing that I wanted. But we had to hurry up and get it because I also had a signing at BSI Comics that Friday because I couldn't do it Saturday because we had Supercard, and the signing started at 1, and we were in line for Kenny Koda. God, who else did we meet? Kenny, Hiroishi. Like everybody was there. Everybody was there. So we were in lines for about 6 hours. So we knew like a signing Saturday wouldn't work, but it was a low key signing. But I had access session at 5 o'clock because I met Shinsuke.
Yeah.
So that was the one thing I got myself was a VIP meet and greet with Nakamura.
Oh, nice.
And I paid for it. I actually, by the time they sold out online, so I actually went to eBay and got it cheaper. So, yeah, someone was just selling, it was a scalp thing, but like he had an honest bid on it. He didn't raise the prices, and I actually ended up paying cheaper than what I would have paid if I had I saved like $20.
Okay.
So met Shinsuke, and that was it. Like that was my one thing I wanted. So did signing, went to Access. It was just a full wrestling weekend. So I'm trying to figure out how to do it this year because I have a signing at Eastside Mags that Friday, and then trying to figure out my Supercard plans for Saturday, and then Mania Sunday, and then trying to figure out what day we might do Access, because I think we're just going to do a day of Access. Because the VIP things, they look great this year, but like we just moved, so we're not as ballin' as we were last year. So it all comes down and just trying to like figure everything out. But I'm into it. So yeah.
So you mentioned that you're going to be part of the WrestleMania special comic book for Boom Studios.
Yeah, it's my second year. So this will be my second WrestleMania. I did the Survivor Series special, the Raw 25th anniversary special, the Forever special, the Royal Rumble special. So I'm all over the place. But yeah, this is my second WrestleMania special. Yeah, I was a last minute thing. Someone had to bow out. Just deadlines happen, and my editor Chris Rosa tagged me in, and I had a week to put together a script. It was something that WWE wanted, and I put it together, and it was I finally did something that I set out to do when I got signed on to this. So I finally get to tell my Shinsuke story, and I finally get to tell the Shinsuke Nakamura story, and I think it's great. My editor liked it, and I'm waiting on WWE approval as we speak.
Nice. When you're writing these comics for Boom Studios, these WWE comics, being a wrestling fan, how do you go about writing these scripts that will stay true to the wrestlers, but also be open to your casual comic book reader?
Easily. I feel like I write them pretty easily for the most part, because one of the things that, when I talk about, Jasmine hiring me, and I make that joke, she's like, well, you know the product, you know the character, you know the universe, so you're an easy fit, and you're a natural fit. And yeah, so there's a lot of pressure sometimes if you don't like mess it up. Like, I think of the Mania special last year, I did Steamboat and a Savage at WrestleMania 3. So they wanted me to tell that story, and I did the best job I could, basically, of just kind of creating it like a Greek myth. So it had a lot of story, like a fairy tale sort of narration. With the giving Taker his origin story for the first Survivor Series thing, I think that may have been my hardest one, just because mainly it went through so many revisions, because it was really unclear of, I guess, when we start, who actually, likeness that we have. Because I was like, okay, well, we got to have Brother Love, we got to have Jack Tunney. And, my editor came back and was like, we don't have likenesses to any of those guys. You got to look proud of it. And I was like, well, shit, that's like his whole fucking story. So I came up with something, and I wrote it, and it was an 8-pager. And then something happened where it got moved, and then it got gutted, because they're like, okay, well, actually, they want like this story in now. So mine got cut to a 4-pager and had to rework everything. But then WWE was like, oh, but we really like yours. How about we just make it like a 6-pager? I'm like, oh my God, you're killing me here. So I went back and then rewrote it yet again. So yeah, I think that was just the hardest one, of just trying to figure out what exactly they wanted. But yeah, I don't know. It worked out, I guess, for the most part. I think so. I worked with my buddy Kelly Williams on that, and bought the art for it, because I felt like it was one of our best things that I done.
What sort of like creative license do you feel like you get when telling these stories of these wrestlers, these iconic wrestlers? What sort of room do you have to tell these stories?
That's actually a really good question, and one I don't really get asked a lot. I think the most questions I get is, what's it like writing real people? And I make this joke about, well, they're not really real people. It's not exactly like Mark Calloway is an undead wizard. So that's actually a really good question. I feel like there's a lot of wiggle room, but one thing that WWE told me was, like, we like how you get the voices right for these characters. You know what you're talking about. I'm like, thanks, I try. So thanks. So I just try to know the voices the best I could and how I remember them. I mean, it's sort of like I wanted Undertaker to be as, like, basically, if he was like picked, from our collective consciousness, about like what the Undertaker sounds like, what he looks like, and everything like that. Keep his. You don't see anything in my Taker scripts, and I've written them a few times. You don't see a lot of words. It's not a lot of dialogue. He basically gets to the point, and he's very straightforward in what he wants and what he wants out of his teammates. Even when working with DiBiase's talking, and Taker's just like, what do you want? And so he kind of has to negotiate with very few words. So I think the best part about it was I think with my Forever story, Razor, I got to write Razor, and I basically just rewatched all of his vignettes, and I wanted to get down like his dialogue, his use of Spanish slang, which is really weird when you consider now, like, Scott Hall is not the least Hispanic.
Right.
You think back and you're like, oh no, this is almost brown facing, almost.
Did you ever hear like the story about the creation of the Razor Ramon gimmick?
It's so good, because Vince had never seen Scarface.
Right.
And he's like, oh wow, I'm ripping off this movie, and luckily Vince has never seen it. Because then you watch it and then you know, as an adult, you see Scarface, you're like, oh yeah, this is yeah. He's like, oh, these WWF superstars, these cockroaches, and then you're like, oh yeah, that's exactly what he is. Got it. He even drives like the same like convertible.
Yes.
And, yeah, I was like, oh man, the symbolism's all there.
It's
Perfect.
all there.
So yeah, his loud ass clothes, his jewelry. So yeah, it's really even the whole thing about say hello to the bad guy.
Right.
Like that is ripped from that movie. And I you know, we have to thank, you know, some sort of deity that McMahon's ignorance of not seeing that movie. Otherwise, we may have just gotten somebody completely different.
Right.
But no, it's a really fun story. But I try to incorporate like, you know, him calling, because he gets into a fight with DiBiase at a jewelry store, because this is sort of the beginning of their feud, and he calls him like a viejo and listen here, pero, and just, you know, all this other kind of stuff. I think I called him like an invadio at one point, but they were like, no, that's too much. Call him a what is it? Chavala? Something like that. Sorry, my Yiddish is coming out. Chavala. There we go. Because it was something like, I think it means lass, like little girl, something kind of slang like that. And it was just fun to write basically like Razor of just like, you know, had the story about new money versus old money, and just, you know, because Razor was the one that retired DiBiase from the WWF in '93. So yeah, I just wanted to definitely just have that sort of moment, and I don't know, it was fun. It was probably the most fun script I had making. So, but as for license, there's creative license. There's been a few instances where I've gotten notes back from WWE, like, okay, well, this is the story, this is who he can only interact with, or, you know, you can't call, you know, you can't do bad words. Like we can't write The Rock, for example. Like we can write The Rock, but we can't show The Rock, because it takes a long time to get to Dave Johnson.
Okay.
Dwayne Johnson.
Dwayne.
Jesus Christ. Dwayne. It takes a long time to get approval from like Dwayne's people, because he has to approve everything.
Yeah.
So our motto was basically like, just don't show him. If you're going to have The Rock, just don't show him. Like, and so if you look at the WrestleMania special last year, where Michael did this page of The Rock interfering with the Miz and Cena match. And, like, he punches, but his arm is in front of his face, so his face is blocked. So, you know, there's a few creative moments about, like, you know, how you, what we can do and how we can do it certain ways. Like, I couldn't have, like, when I wrote Ric Flair, I wanted to be more showboat, but, like, 92 Flair was a sleazebag.
Yeah.
He, you know, that whole thing about, like, him and Savage, before she was yours, she was mine. I'm like, ugh, you're gross. But that was, like, his character, like, but that was, you know, one of the best things of, like, early, or I guess late 80s Ric Flair was basically how he could just take any woman he wanted. Like, I'm going to fuck your wife, and then your girlfriend's going to watch. It's going to be great, because I'm Ric Flair. I think my favorite Ric Flair thing of just the overexcited when he takes off his shoes and it's like, these lizard shoes cost more than your house. And I'm like, I believe it. I absolutely believe it. Yeah, that's about right. So I wanted to have that sort of Ric Flair to just be like, no, I'm Ric Flair. And, you know, Heenan, because I wrote Mr. Perfect and Bobby Heenan in the same story, and they're like, yeah, but, like, you don't know what's coming, because this Shawn Michaels kid, this Bret Hart kid, like, this is going to be your opposition. You think you're going to go after the big guns, but what you don't see is these stars coming up. And then, like, you realize Bret's the guy who beats Flair for his first world championship. So I really wanted to have like a showboat and Ric Flair of basically him just not giving a shit and just like enjoying the best life he could at the same time. So anyway, sorry, I digress. But back to your question about leeway. There's definitely some leeway. We just can't get like too. We just can't get too weird. But there's definitely a lot of license that we can take if it's still sort of in the same vein of things.
Right.
Like all of a sudden, like we can't be like, well, what is AJ Styles really like? And then him like kicking puppies or something like like Cobra Commander style. They'll be like, no, that's not right. So.
Right. A lot of these characters are, highly, visual people also. As the writer of this, how does it go along with, whatever artist is drawing these characters for the comic books, especially like an Undertaker? How does that synergy happen in this sort of world?
So for the first story, I did a backup in issue number 8, and it was Paul Bearer and Undertaker making a coffin for Kamala for the '92 Survivor Series, and Jasmine just put together me with Kelly Williams, and he's a horror artist. Check out his stuff. He has his own stuff about mini comics in the dark. He does The Cabinet. A lot of EC horror looking stuff is really, I think he did a creepy issue. So really, really cool guy. And so for the most part, it's usually just, I don't have a lot of say in who I work with, and that's fine. But I wish there was definitely more collaborative efforts. So by the time the Survivor Series special came out, I was like, hey, can I work with Kelly again? And Chris was like, yeah, I was going to pair you guys up again for the story because he draws a really good Undertaker. And he did. So we basically just worked together, and he's like, how do you like this layout? What you feeling here? And I liked what he had. And it was funny because WWE actually made him redraw this one panel, I think, 3 times. It was just a shot of Virgil. And for some reason, of all things, they were like, this Virgil likeness isn't good enough.
Really? Virgil?
That's what I was like, Virgil? So, and then when he worked on the Taker graphic novel with a lot of cool people, I helped he's like, hey, what does this look like? And, so there was some mild collaboration of just trying to, because he doesn't really watch, like, a lot of wrestling. So I just helped what I could and consulted what I could. But for the most part, no, there's no really collaborative effort between us, which is, it's difficult, but also at the same time, I guess a blessing, because these editors do know what these artists are capable of. Like, I have no idea who's drawing my Shinsuke story, so and because that was such a tight turnaround, because I turned in a draft Monday because I had a week to do a draft, so I did 10 pages in a week after I did the outline. And then I had to do revisions because I knew I wasn't going to get away with it, but I thought just in case. So I was going to have like a not so secret cameo of Tanahashi and Okada.
Right.
Basically, like, he goes to hang out with Tanahashi and Okada, but you can't see their faces. So he's like, you gotta take these clones out, guy. I was like, I tried. So when I end up, I know. I was like, it was a long shot. I shot my shot, whatever.
Right.
So basically, what ends up happening is I later wrote it, and it's him and Asuka meeting for brunch.
Nice.
Basically talking about like the pressures they both won the Rumble last year. They both won their respective Rumbles last year. So it's them just talking about the pressures that are on, and like how Shinsuke kind of felt like his career was at a stalemate, and then he won the Rumble, and then he almost has like this imposter syndrome.
Okay.
So like, do I belong here? I lost to Ginger twice in a row. I don't know if I'm the right guy to have done this. So he basically just has a whole thing, and Asuka's like, no, but like you have to remind them why you're here. Like, they want to call you the rock star, but I know you can be better. Remind them why you're king. So, and that's basically like their little moment together. And yeah, it was fun because I love Shinsuke. I've been following his career for, I guess it's 13 years now. And meeting him last year was great. I gave him a copy of the WrestleMania issue, and he's just one of my favorite guys.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see, what his career is like. But the fact that I still got to write him, and then Asuka, because I think she's just, when I think of the things that I love about wrestling, her and Shinsuke are a perfect culmination of like everything. Pageantry,
yes,
which is like entrance, banging theme music,
yeah,
great in the ring, weird promos. Like you're really not exactly quite sure. Like, could Shinsuke be an alien? Yeah, I think so. So it's just one of those things. Like, yeah, that seems about right. So I love those things about wrestling. Like I love big ass stupid entrances. I love obviously banger theme music. It's something because every part of their character is storytelling.
Yeah.
And from how they move to the ring, how they look, from their attire to their finisher move to their ring psychology, it's all storytelling. And excuse me. Ooh. And I was at Phantom Comics this past weekend. Shout out to Phantom Comics in DC and DuPont Circle. And my friend Raven, who's a manager at the store, put together a wrestling workshop.
Okay.
So we had wrestlers from Shikara. We had local guys. Blank from Shikara was there, and he just everyone was there basically like talking about how wrestling is a great storytelling medium. And I have this sign I bring to me at my table. That's one of those light up boards, those mini light up boards.
Yeah.
And it says, "Ask me about wrestling." And it gets people talking because it's usually like, so what do you think about wrestling? And I'm like, that's such a broad question. But my usual answer is like, I think it's an underrated storytelling medium.
Oh, okay.
Yet, yes, it is a sport, but it is also drama. And how everyone tells their story from every part of their character is something interesting and something that you're able to access.
Right.
So I think that's the best part about it.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Is like with everything you just said about the Shinsuke and Asuka story that you're writing, and everything you just said about wrestling, how does that sort of parallel with the comic book world?
I think it's great because what we do is, and a lot of people, I guess, don't really know because it doesn't get a lot of TV time, but or people or wrestlers will just put up like a post of a page or a cover, and they'll be like, I will look at the fan, interactions. Asuka will be like, "Oh, this looks great," and minor annoyance, but like not tag the writer, not tag the artist, and people are like, "Oh, this looks great. Well, this should be a comic." And I'll come in and be like, "Guess what? It is." So, or like my boy Raza, who does our cover art, who does great cover art. God bless you. You are just phenomenal talent. People are like, "Oh, they buy that as a print. What is that?" I'm like, "It's a cover by my boy Raza. Check it out in March." So, it's I almost have to be like the patron saint of getting credit on certain things because I think we work really well, and our job is basically like when the cameras aren't on. There's there's so much story that doesn't, we don't see as fans. Raw's only once a week, and that's 3 hours.
Yeah.
What happens within this week? Oh, well, we know kind of what happens because everyone has social media accounts. We can kind of get ideas, and
Right.
that was my thing with Shinsuke, was like, okay, well, I'm starting this story off with him surfing. If you follow Shinsuke...
Of course.
Yes. If you follow Shinsuke on any social media, the boy loves to surf.
I think with Shinsuke, I think his favorite part about being in WWE is that he gets to travel the world and surf at more beaches.
He surfs all these beaches. That man is just happy on his board. So I was like, look, undistinguished number of pages, just have him, like panels, just have him surf. Here's the dialogue. Just here's what he looks like when he surfs. Here's what he wears when he surfs. So you can draw whatever from the shorts to the full body thing. Up to you. But like the first page has to have him surfing. So
there's a part of me that feels like I don't think he cares how he's booked in WWE. As long as he's making good money and being and able to surf all these beaches around the world, he's happy.
He had to uproot his family from Japan, so I feel like his wife knew a lot of English because I forgot what she does, but I know that she actually helped him with his English when they first got here.
Yeah.
Because there's this interview on Jericho's podcast with Shinsuke first getting there, and Chris did this very cool thing, and I admire. He kept the questions not dumbed down, but sort of very, very easy for him to understand.
Yeah.
But they were still very deep questions.
Yes.
Like my favorite thing is basically, like how did you come up with your finisher? And you hear him pause, and he basically says like, on TV, it's very hard to relate to what it feels like when someone body slams you or does whatever, but I think we can all relate to what it might feel like when someone knees you in the face really hard.
Wow.
And I'm like, that is utterly fantastic and so simple. Because you're like, yeah, what does a diamond cutter feel like? You can't feel great, but like, I've been kneed in the face.
Right.
Like, yeah, that's going to suck. That's going to suck a lot. So, but it's a great interview too, because he also talks about like the difficulty of trying to find like this Asian market, because he really loves that one Japanese dish. I'm trying to remember what it's called, but it's fermented fermented bean sprouts. I can't remember what it's called right now, but that's like his favorite thing to eat. And it took him a really long time to find like an Asian market. But his wife was very good at English and taught him, and I think he took classes too, because when he still had his Snap, one of his first friends that he made there was Mojo Rawley.
Yeah.
So I kind of figured like, a lot of people helped him with his English, and now he's great. Now he's hysterical. Like, especially last year when he did that whole villain about how he doesn't speak English. Fantastic.
Dude, that was hilarious.
Absolutely fantastic. Like, I kind of wanted him to do what Asuka did and just did promos in Japanese and just scream obscenities to you in Japanese.
Yes.
But it just seems, more authentic. But I also think I'd love for them to do, especially when they were doing, like, them shooting their own promos with, like, their phones and stuff.
Yeah.
I think it would have been great if they actually took the time out to do subtitles. I feel like, especially when, he was at heel and didn't want to speak English, that would have been the perfect time to incorporate, like, have him do, like, really deep thoughts and sentences and what he wants to convey as a villain in Japanese.
Right.
Like, that's beautiful, too. That should have been what should have been done, but no one listens to me, and it's fine. But I think comics is a perfect storytelling medium to go along with this, because they're superheroes and supervillains. Like, we have Braun out here tipping over cars just for the fun of it, just tipping over trucks. Like he's goddamn super shredder, and who was, played by Kevin Nash, coincidentally.
Yes.
So, and then, what happens afterwards? Does he eat the car? Maybe. Who knows? So it's really good in how we can come in and fill the void of, how these characters really came to be and how they interact with each other. Because one thing I kind of wish they'd go back to is vignettes.
Oh, yes.
I really think a lot of characters would benefit from vignettes. And I don't mean like clip shows of them, like their whole thing is then cut a promo and then like it's like a slideshow. I don't want a demo reel. I want something they do in character. Like the closest thing I think they got to was EC3's thing about coming in and then undressing and then like him just showing off his muscles. I'm like, that's probably the closest thing, but like we haven't, like when like we had like a whole month of like, Angle coming in. We had a whole month of him like showing off his medals and like, I'm ready to come to the WWF.
Right.
Or, Carlito, Kofi. We get a sense of where they're from, who they are, what they're about.
Yeah.
And you can make 30-second things and air them like twice a week. And by the time they get there, we're like, oh, this is what this person's about. A++.
Right.
Now I know if I can relate to this character or if they're just, or the fact that they actually have a character is the best part.
Right. Like how dope was it when the before Mr. Perfect debuted in WWF? Like all those things where like he'd throw the football from one end of the field and catch it on the other.
Right. He'd do this thing with Wade Boggs. He'd do all those dingers with Wade Boggs.
Yeah.
He'd do those one shot from behind basket shots. He'd do the thing with golf. Like, I mean, yeah, they were really cool. Plus Mr. Perfect is like in my top 5 easily. Especially if you just see the gif of him just perfect plexing the giant and still being able to like bridge his feet.
Right.
Killer. Plus him and Brett at SummerSlam, one of the best matches of all time. But there's a behind the scenes thing they did, and I forget how many shots it took for him to actually like get that basketball, because that was not one take.
Oh, definitely.
But it's like, yeah, you get a nice sense of like, oh, this guy's a really good athlete and really good at what he does. Awesome. I know who this guy is. He's a jerk, but he's really good at what he does.
Right. Yeah, and it's cool, like what you're talking about, how comics can be that thing to like sort of fill in that other space of these people's stories. You've seen it in other comic books, or even when like a TV series ends, like say something like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, they continued on with the story afterwards in the comic book universe. So comic books have this sort of space to tell these other like stories within stories and stuff like that. And being that we're in this really cool age of wrestling, it's cool that wrestling can be a part of the comic book universe.
I think so. I mean, especially, because this isn't the first time that wrestling has come to comics. Marvel had the WCW license in the early 90s. WWE's been licensed a few times. I think one by Titan Books, one by another one. I can't remember what it's called. Oh, Chaos. Chaos had the license in the late 90s, and that was casually hideous. But, that Paul Bearer story, like, he's a borderline rapist. Not great guy. And it exists. Yeah. And Warrior had his own comic in the mid-90s that makes no sense whatsoever. Go back, find this issue, read me the Ultimate Warrior story. It will not make any sense whatsoever. None whatsoever. But the fact that someone, I can't remember who, actually gave Warrior an origin story was kind of great. He was like this cave explorer, and then he came across like this. He's basically like Juggernaut. He came across the Gem of Cyttorak, and it is absolutely great. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly how this happens. That is bananas. And so my favorite thing when people ask, like, is this canon? I'm like, I guess. Is this canon as it's gonna get? Maybe? So it's as real as you want it to be, guy. Like that's how it is. So yeah, I think there's a lot of fun, especially. I mean, the '90s WCW comic isn't that great. It's weird, but there's this famous panel where Sting visits this kid in the hospital, and this kid's like, I want you to win out there. I want you to do this for me, Stinger. I can't remember what it was. Something about, I think it was like trying to cure his cancer. And Sting's like, I can't do that. But what I can do is make you an honorary Stinger. And the kid's like, oh, okay. I'll see if I can find this. I'll see if I can find this for you later and be like, yeah, no, this absolutely exists. This absolutely something.
Like, that's gonna help me.
right, and like how the art conveys is just sort of like, I found it. The wildest moments from Marvel's WCW. Sting, can you help me make me better? And then the nurse actually says, no, Julie, Sting is only human like the rest of us, but he can make you an official Stinger. Thanks. I'll send this to you over Facebook right now. But so in case you want to, give context to people who actually listen and post this up on Twitter, but like, this is a weird thing. There's wild shit in this like series. But I mean, the '90s roster was really weird. I mean, but you had guys like Ron Simmons, Z-Man. I think Sid was in it for a brief. I think he came back as Sid Justice around that time.
Yeah.
Or was he something else? Anyway, but yeah, it's just wild. So the fact that we can actually go off and, be weird to a certain extent as well here. We're not talking about like getting super, super weird, but
right.
There's definitely part of us that were like, well, how does this happen? And I'm like, well, this would be what I would do here. Or I'm trying to think of another really good example. Or like Kevin Panetta and Dominic Stanton did this Table for Three issue, was like this story in the Attitude Special where it was Dude Love, Mankind, and Cactus Jack having dinner with one another. Like, I feel like that's something because they are different people. Yeah. As far as we know, they are different people. They're just different personalities.
Right.
So the fact that we are able to have this sort of freedom, and there is a certain amount of freedom, but, as saying, Kelly Frazier, there you are, had to find you on the Facebook. And I think it's perfect. I think there's nothing better that what we could possibly, do with this stuff aside from, maybe like another sort of animated series.
Right. And the thing is with wrestling, in regards to, is this in the wrestling canon? The thing is with wrestling is that if wrestling wants to ignore something, they're going to ignore it too.
Oh, well, yeah, it's Vince's playground. Like, we can definitely be like, hey, well, I mean, I look at 1999 as a really good example of like they can ignore whatever the fuck they want. When like the year begins with Rock and Mankind beating the dog shit out of each other at the Rumble and Halftime Heat, and by the end of it, they're like multiple time tag team champions.
Right. That was a wild year.
99 was really wild because you could definitely tell, WWE was throwing out like big guns, like world title matches every week, because the world title actually changed 11 times in 1999.
That's wild.
You don't see that anymore.
No.
And that's fine. I like long title reigns. I don't like too long title reigns, but I like enough title reigns to where it feels like, oh man, when you finally lose, it's a big deal.
Right.
And yes, by the way, I just sent you that Sting panel over on Facebook.
Yes.
So, but yeah, I feel like comics are a perfect medium for this. And yeah, the last issue's out, and I think the series actually wraps completely with the WrestleMania specials. So it's a good. I feel good to have been part of it for as long as I have been, and been able to do what I've been able to do and tell people like, no, this series is great. Dennis has done a really good job of putting everything together, and I wished him nothing but the best. And I have no idea what the future holds if they want to get the license back, but I'm down either way.
Right.
So I'm here.
I always like to ask this question during these interviews: is that what's like a lesson, like a little like nugget of advice about your life or career that anybody, doesn't matter what sort of avenue of artistry that they're in, could sort of project onto their own life and career. And it's sort of a lesson from your life.
Shoot your shot. That's what I would say. Like, if you have an idea, even if no one likes it, make it. I mean, I learn from your mistakes though. At the same time, like, don't just continuously putting out garbage, but
right.
learn along the way. I mean, I first pitched my first comic when I was like 24. I was out of my element when I actually learned, like, oh, you gotta make. Oh man. So, but I mean, I learned. I did some interning over at Top Cow, and I learned from guys like Ron Mars, Ted Nafee, Tom King, Scott Snyder. So, I mean, Scott and I have been friends for like a decade. He's been a really good mentor, and just like, well, this is, you do this. Because if I've learned in the past that I need someone to tell me, you need to rein this shit in, because otherwise, and that's the thing, I like building worlds. Like, I will tell you, like, point blank, my Survivor series take your origin story. Now that I thought about it, like, after I told them the plot, would have been like the whole issue. And so I'm glad they told me, like, well, we can't even do like these first two things you have planned. So I'm like, well, all right, I guess I'll just do the third act of my 5-act play and call it a day. So, and it works. I do have that problem every now and then, but my thing is just learn from your mistakes, but don't be discouraged. But if someone says, well, this sucks, learn why it sucks. Just try not to take shit personally. And then you may learn, like, oh yeah, that is shit. But you may have had fun, like, writing it, made fun creating it, even if it's like a dumb idea. I'm in the middle of something with my buddy Chris Haley, and we were like, I told him an idea for something, and it's going to be part of an anthology later in the year. But he's like, hey man, this is the stupidest and most fun idea I've ever had. If we go in together, you want to pitch this to Nickelodeon? And I'm like, you know what? Sure. I don't, that's fine, because it's dumb. And yes, comics can be art. Comics can be educational purposes. Comics can be a great medium. But at the end of the day, look, you're not curing cancer. You're not making any sort of like breakthroughs as a societal thing. Have fun with it. And that's what I feel like a lot of people don't understand, or put a lot of pressure on themselves right out of the gate when they want to make like 100-page magnum opus. And it's like, start small. My first paid gig was like 2 pages, because if you can't write a story in 2 pages, no way you're gonna be able to write one in 100.
Right.
So that's my multiple layered advice. Yeah.
And I always like to end my interviews with the same question. I always give it to people ahead of time to think about. Who is somebody that's been a part of your life or career that I could realistically interview for this podcast that would have some good stories or lessons to talk about?
And I thought about this. I thought about this for a while, and I definitely think it's interesting. I'd love for you to, if you're available, definitely talk to 2 people who have really like helped me, and I mentioned them, Ron Mars and Tom King. Ron was basically a cornerstone of my like childhood. I was a huge Green Lantern fan, and Kyle Rayner came in, I think, when I was like 11. So being friends with Ron now is great. And then seeing Tom's rise in the past 7 years when he was at Heroes Con in 2012, just trying to sell his book and getting his name out there, and seeing that he's just a powerhouse now, and what he did with Vision, what he did with Omega Men, what he did with Mr. Miracle, and how he's, surely becoming a household name. And, I think people really need to see that we all start somewhere. People want to start automatically and just try to get signed to big names and everything like that. But there's so much work and brain power that has to, help forge this creative outlet that, it may seem like some people overnight, but some people never see like the long nights and what they went through beforehand. And I think both those guys have really good stories about getting there.
Nice. Yeah, thanks for those suggestions. Before we get out of here, where can people go online to get more information about what you're up to?
Okay, so my social number is 254. Wait, no. Okay, I'm easily to find on Twitter. Twitter's easy. I'm at Pittstuff, PITTSED_OFF. That's where you can reach me at any time. My DMs are open. Don't be weird, but just be like, hey, I want it. Don't be weird. Don't be weird. It's an easy life. You know what? Go back to my life lesson learning. Don't be weird. That's the thing. But just if you want me to take a look at your thing, if you need, any young creator out there wants second eyes on a project, I'm always available. I do sleep. I sleep poorly, but when I do, I'm not answering my phone. But
right.
Twitter's always great. Instagram, if you like torty cats and wrestling pics, my Instagram's full of those, and those are the best ways to get a hold of me. And I'd love to talk to more wrestling fans out there and my thoughts. Also, if you love Destiny on PS4, my handle is Orionstar, ORYONSTAR. Come find me. I'm always looking for fire team members to do things with.
Sweet. All right, man. It's been great talking with you, man. Thanks for all the wrestling talk.
All right. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no doubt, man. You have a good day.
Oh, you stay fresh.
Okay, that was my interview with Lan Pitts. All the links to wherever to follow him online will be in the show notes for this episode on freshasthepodcast.com. So that's another interview in the books. Thank you for listening. Goodbye and good night.
Fresh is the word.